I call to order the Plan Commission meeting of July 25. We can now proceed with roll call. Madison Myers, could you offer us a roll call, please?
Hello.
Maybe her sound isn't working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's somewhere else. She's there.
Okay.
Looks like she's muted. I'll go check.
Oh,
there she is.
here she is now. Hi.
Microphone troubles.
Hi. Oh, there you are. All right, very good. All right.
All right. Mr. Holman? Mr. Coots?
Here.
Ms. Lazaris?
Here.
Ms. Curler?
Here?
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Dr. Mason?
Here.
All right, thank you. Mr. Grady informed us that he would not be able to attend tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, item number 3, correction and/or acceptance of the meeting minutes of May 23, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes as written.
Mason, second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Foster and seconded by Dr. Mason to approve the minutes of May 23. Are there any comments? All right, hearing none, then we'll proceed with roll call vote on the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Coots?
Abstain.
Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Dr. Mason?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, thank you. Item number 4, questions and public comment. The public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. If your comments do pertain to a public hearing, please hold your comments until the hearing. We do have one public hearing this evening, item number 5, rezoning request by Bauman to rezone property at 904 East Lake Street from RD Rural Development to R14 Single Family Residential. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered previously with the city clerk before the meeting. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the commission on items that are not on the agenda. Please keep comments limited to 3 minutes. State name and address when starting comments. Also fill out the sign-in sheet at the podium. For people online, please follow the Zoom link or the phone number listed on the Plan Commission agenda. Are there any public comments at this time? And is there anyone commenting online? Do you have a comment regarding something that is the public hearing for the rezoning? All right. In that case, that's not a subject of a public hearing, so you may approach and speak to that right now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My name is John Kopp. My wife and I live next door to the property under consideration for rezoning for Barry Luce. I don't think there's anything we can say to change anybody's mind about getting it rezoned to an apartment building. I just as soon have it torn down. It's just a shambles. That being said, there's a few things that I would like to have after reviewing the drawings. I'd like to have added or amended in some way. First of all, the setback on our property line is less than 15 feet. And I see that they've changed it to now 5 feet. Well, there's a fire escape that's already encroaching on that 5 feet. So I'd like to see that move to the other side of the property, if possible. There's a retention pond being built in the back. It looks as though, from the drawing, and I'm not a drawing expert, it looks as though the drainage from that would enter into our property and not someplace else. So I'd like to see that changed. Air conditioning. Because the building is so close to our house, if they put window air conditioners in, it's just going to be very, very noisy. I'd like to see some other method of air conditioning. And I'd like to have insured licensed contractors working on that property, not some individual that is cheap and not licensed. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. We are still in public comment. Questions in public comment. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak under item number 4? All right. Does anyone else have comments under this item? Would anyone else like to comment under questions and public comment? All right, Clays, I'll close item number 4, and we'll go on to item number 5, public hearing. Zoning amendment request by Brian Bauman from Rural Development RD to Single-Family Residential R14 at 904 East Lake Street, parcel number 246071418220002. Before we take public comment on this, and I would like to call on Mr. Wolf to provide an overview of this request.
Thank you, Ms. Lazarus. The property in question is located off of Lake Street in Enterprise. This was recently annexed in April into the community. They needed connection to municipal utilities, standard procedure, obviously, that they be annexed into the community. When the city annexes property, it comes in with a temporary zoning district, and that's the RD, Rural Development District. That's our, I don't want to say most restrictive, it allows the least amount of development associated with it. That has been a standard practice for nearly 20 years that I can recall. And then at a later date, such as today, the property owner applies for its permanent zoning. In this case, it's the R14, which is our single-family sewered district. The image up here kind of shows you, highlights the property. When reviewing the proposed zoning, we certainly look at the current use of the property, and then, of course, the relationship to neighboring properties and uses. As you can see, make that a little larger. There's a single-family residence on the subject property. So obviously aligns with our R14 district. To the east of it and generally to the north are more R14 single-family properties. There are a handful of properties that are still located within the town, so they just have town zoning. To the northwest is our R312, which is our multifamily district related to an existing mobile home park. To the south and to the southwest is the industrial park. So you'll see varying degrees of industrial zoning, but the parcel immediately south of this is planned industrial. So in reviewing kind of our findings associated with this about the uses and the surrounding uses, is the proposed zoning consistent with the zonings or uses of properties in the area? It is our opinion that it is. Is the suitability for this property aligning with the requested zoning? And yes, it is to make it legal and conforming. So very straightforward from our perspective. Trend of development in the area, really, aside from the industrial park, it's just consistently been single-family zoning. So it's a very straightforward request. From the staff's perspective, it does meet our findings to enable the rezoning, and we're supportive of it.
All right. right, thank you. We are in public hearing. Are there any comments concerning this rezoning? If so, please approach the podium stating your name and address and also writing them for the record. Would anyone like to speak concerning this proposed rezoning? Are there any comments concerning this proposed rezoning? All right, hearing none, we go on to item number 6. Discussion recommendation on zoning amendment request from Brian Bauman from rural development RD to single-family residential R14 at 904 East Lake Street, parcel number 246071418220002. There is a prepared motion, Plan Commissioners, before you, and this is Plan Commission Motion 2371, recommendation to City Council for zoning amendment, parcel 246071418220002 by owner petitioner Brian Bauman. Motion 2371 sets forth the city zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes. It calls forth the regulations and city code regarding rezoning, the annexation of subject property which has already taken place, the request for rezoning from rural development RD to R14 single-family residential, the review by city staff and consultants tonight's public hearing, and Plan Commission review. This motion does provide for a recommendation to the City Council to approve the requested rezoning is subject to procedures in Chapter 660 zoning regulations and subject to the site meeting requirements noted in the planner's memo. Plan Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions regarding this proposed rezoning?
So I do have a question, and it really holds no bearing on my decision in this thing, but I'm just kind of curious. When we annex these folks, these properties in like this, and they do have their own sewers and wells, what do we do as far as a city with these wells? Because I know we have well inspections, stuff like that. Do we ask them to cap these, or I'm just kind of curious what we have them do with?
Well, it depends a little bit on the situation. Oftentimes what brings up the annexation is the failure of a well or failure of a septic system and necessitates them connecting to our system, which would resolve that issue. Otherwise, if they were annexed in while they still had they would certainly have to connect upon failure, or it's typically a requirement upon annexation. So we would require them to remediate, cap, remove whatever it may be. It would be at their responsibility to resolve any issues with those private facilities.
Right. Okay, I just didn't know if we had any regulations that would require them to do that once they connect.
Yeah, as a general rule, we do not allow private wells and private septic.
Right.
So by ordinance, they're not permitted.
Okay. That was all I have for questions.
Oh, Ms. Keller.
Dustin, I just had a quick question. In the prepared motion, it refers to the recommendations in the planner's memo. And in this memo, I don't see any outstanding issues, but maybe I missed it. So are there any conditions or recommendations that you have before approving this?
There are no conditions. This memo highlights its compliance with the findings for the rezone specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Are there any further comments, or does anyone wish to make a motion regarding the Plan Commission Motion 2371?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve PC Motion 2371 zoning amendment for Bauman 904 East Lake Street.
Mr. Coots will second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Coots to approve, to pass Plan Commission Motion 2371. Further discussion? All right, in that case, then we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Dr. Mason?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Next is item number 7, discussion recommendation on general development plan and precise implementation plan for Cottage Hotel Apartments at 265 South Main Street, parcel number 246071314140002. And we'll start, Mr. Wolf, if you would do the overview of where this process is now, and we recall that that the parties were here in October of '21, and the rezoning was completed at that time, and now they are coming forward with the general development plan and precise implementation plan.
Thank you. As you had mentioned, this does have a little lengthy background. We've tried to highlight it in the memo. It's a pretty lengthy memo out there available for reviewing. As you had indicated, this came to us a couple years ago for redevelopment of the site and rezoning of the site. It's important to understand that this property obviously was developed many, many decades ago under a previous set of zoning regulations and building code regulations. With the extensive rehabilitation and renovation that they were proposing, it needed to come before us for zoning change and then obviously to comply with building code requirements. So when it was before us previously and we had a public hearing on it, it was to go to the R312, which is our multifamily district, with the planned development district overlay associated with it. It is because under strict zoning, it cannot meet the bulk requirements spelled out. That is just a condition of the existing situation of the location and size of the structure, the size of the and width of the property that it's on. So the planned development district, if feel that it meets the threshold for approval, allows certain exceptions to code, to the zoning code, to enable a development of varying types. In this case, it's an attempt to preserve historic structure and renovate a historic structure within the community. There certainly is going to be a longer kind of history to this site, but a public hearing was held previously, and the Plan Commission did recommend approval to the council of a general development plan. At that time, it was specifically a general development plan because it did not have the details required for approval of a precise implementation plan. That recommendation was made to the council. It did not get to the council level because of the necessary materials, that details and plan details to be submitted. There were some, I don't say considerable, but utility issues that need to be resolved, specifically extension of water main to provide for sprinkler system and just on-site compliance with utility regulations. There was also reviewing of the stormwater management plan for this property. So the council never took up the general development plan. Sufficient amount of time had passed since the original approval or recommendation by the Plan Commission was felt it was best, now that they have a completed plan set that has the details, that complies with our concurrent general development plan and precise implementation plan approval, that it be brought back to the Plan Commission for review and potential recommendation again to the council for general development plan and precise implementation plan. Again, there's a lot of detail in the memo kind of highlighting this. But going through the project, I'll just highlight a handful of some of the exceptions that were requested and some of the issues that may still need to be resolved with potential approval. So again, the use is an apartment complex, or proposed apartment complex. It's had kind of rooming house or different kind of activities over the past few decades. But at this time, it is really to be developed as a 9-unit apartment complex. Within this, I'll say, historic structure, it hasn't been defined as a national register or anything, but I'll say a locally significant structure. The footprint of the building really is not proposed to be changed, but there are certain site improvements that are being proposed to ensure that impacts such as parking and such are minimal to surrounding properties. When you have 9 apartments, you will likely have at least 9 vehicles on site. We talked about the planned development district and the density issues associated with it. It's a little more than a half-acre parcel, and it would have a proposed density of 15 units per acre. So again, that's kind of skewed because of just the size of the existing property. We typically have a maximum density of 12 units per acre in the R3 district, so an exception to enable this was required and approved previously. But that is a specific exception that had to be granted by the PDD. The other is the setbacks. The R3 district requires a 15-foot side setback. And on the south side, it only has a 5-foot setback. That's the existing structure. Short of moving the structure, we can't meet that. So an exception to that bulk regulation of 15 feet down to about 5 feet would be required as well. I know that someone spoke about the issue of the setbacks. Compliance with that setback, again, really is not practical, but it's certainly something for you to evaluate in making a decision or recommendation to the council. Want to point out that the required green space is 35% in this district, and they are meeting that, I'll say, by skin of their teeth, but that's not uncommon. We have a small site. They are adding paved surface to ensure that they have adequate parking, for their tenants on site. So they do meet that requirement. Exception is not required for that. Dwelling unit size, we require 800 square feet per apartment unit. That's the smallest under the traditional zoning, the R312. There are units that are being proposed, and if you're able to see on the screen or in the memo, the ones highlighted in red do not meet the minimum 800 square foot. It's important to understand that there are kind of a number of existing structural walls, et cetera, inside the building. We did request, if you may recall from a couple years ago, that certain units be enlarged slightly to get closer to the 800 square feet, but absent of moving entire walls between units, it may not be practical to get there. But as you can see, all of the units will be at least 700 square feet. Some do get up closer to 1,000 square feet, but you can see that there's a handful of units that would require specific exception to the 800 square foot requirement, and those are listed. Floor plans are provided, to illustrate kind of the spaces. There are some public spaces or common spaces on each floor available. Some of those could have been eliminated. It was discussed at the meeting a couple years ago to not remove those spaces. And again, the Plan Commission supported the exception at that time for the units that were all at least at 700 square feet in size. So materials and appearance, some more detail is required on the plans about especially the exterior materials. It really has kind of a lap siding out there now. It's not clear if they are replacing lap siding with new boards, if they are refurbishing boards out there, painting. So a little more detail is required on the plan set that specifically says color and materials that are going to be utilized on the exterior elevations of the building. Parking. Parking is an area where an exception is required. Strict adherence to the code is requiring 23 parking stalls. It is not expected that these units will generally have families or larger families in them or multiple cars within them. And it's certainly something that needs to be understood by a tenant, that there is parking for individual units. There are 13 parking stalls which are being shown. They are, I'll say, a short walk to downtown where there is public parking available. But this proposed development really isn't intended for people who have multiple cars. And their market will likely not be for people who have multiple cars. To put 23 cars on this site would require really all of the site to be paved, which would certainly detract from neighboring properties. There was a proposal brought in. The petitioners do own the parcel to the north. They did bring in a proposal, as you recall, to combine parts of the lots, put in garages and such, and the Plan Commission and staff both were not supportive of this. They felt that just having surface parking with quality screening will provide for parking on site without resulting in, I'll say, negative impacts to the neighborhood from an aesthetic perspective or operational perspective. There is an expectation that there are single-family homes kind of north and south of this. There's an expectation that they could be in their yards without having to look upon large parking areas. So the Plan Commission at that time did recommend that the lots not be combined, nor a garage structure be constructed back there to meet parking regulations. Landscaping, we have a robust landscaping requirement that has been reviewed. There's some modest amendments that are necessary to the landscaping plan to provide a little more screening in areas that the landscape architect has determined would be best for neighboring properties. But again, our code does clearly spell that out, and they wouldn't be deviating from any requirements related to that. Site lighting, we also have restrictive site lighting to make sure that there's no light spillage at the property lines or minimal foot candle levels. You can't exceed a half a foot candle. That's pretty dim. Bare bulbs, et cetera, can't be seen. They do have to be dark sky compliant and such to make sure that neighboring properties aren't negatively impacted. They did provide a snow removal and storage plan. So they would be using their stormwater area for it, and then potentially moving some snow off-site as necessary to meet it. But they do have kind of larger lawn areas still available to them, so absent multiple large snow events, there shouldn't be issues that they would have to address. They are proposing a trash receptacle. That is certainly important when you have 9 units. That will be in a screen enclosure as we require and meeting our setback requirements. Stormwater management has been reviewed by the city's engineering consultant. That review has been provided to the city under separate cover. So really this memo is just saying any requirements associated with it needs to be adhered to. Fire protection, again, the entire building will be sprinklered. This was kind of the longstanding issue of getting certain utilities designed that extend from the east side of 89, across 89 into the property. So there'll be a hydrant into the property, easements associated with that, and then connections for a sprinkler system, and then obviously just to have a hydrant on site. Secondary, but equally important, is emergency access will be provided for emergency services to Veterans Lane through this site. So an easement, the property owner has been in discussion with the city about this for a while. We just need to make sure that there's an easement that gets recorded to that effect. I'll say it's been a de facto access that the owner has graciously allowed the city to use as needed. In the past, this is to formalize that. It doesn't get utilized often, but in the event that there are issues on veterans or out on a ferry, that they can get out through here. There's a lengthy discussion about the basis for approval. It really just come down to, is the development kind of in the spirit of our regulations for utilizing a planned development district? Is there public benefit to utilizing the planned development district? When we talked about this at last time, it was felt that the opportunity to preserve and rehabilitate a locally significant building was important, as was providing this type of housing product that could be an affordable rental for generally small potential households, single households or two-person households that want proximity to downtown, the ability to walk to downtown. We don't have a product like that in or around downtown, and the opportunity to reutilize this building and meeting contemporary code requirements was viewed as being in the spirit and intent of those regulations. That's certainly something you should still evaluate today. The recommendation section here does again, the staff is recommending approval of the consolidated general development plan and precise implementation plan, but it does specifically call out where exceptions to the bulk regulations be permitted. And you can see on the lot and density requirements, I just want to make it clear, reducing the 2-acre minimum for an R312 to the 0.6 of an acre, increasing the dwelling units per acre from 12 to 15.4. Again, that's a product of 9 units on 0.6 of an acre existing. The lot width, again, when it was platted at 77 feet, the code has changed since then for R312. So to meet the 100-foot minimum isn't practical without combining and tearing down other lots. So allowing the 77-foot lot width, reducing that south side setback for the existing structure from required 15 feet to 5 feet. These are important elements when it comes to potential financing and mortgages, et cetera, because otherwise the building would be classified as legal nonconforming. So we are going through the plan development district process. These are areas where we should be looking to address them to make them legal and conforming. As you can see, specific units that would be allowed to deviate from the 800 square feet, those are clearly listed on the plan sets that have been provided. Some parking deviations to allow the 13-stall parking lot as proposed. And then some conditions of approval, some related to screening of with the landscape plan and recycling and refuse enclosure, the building materials as we discussed, recording that access easement for emergency services, and then anything else that was deemed specifically necessary by engineering, public works, and fire department.
Right.
Try to make it brief. It's a lot.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. Well, with the passage of time, such things occur, and some of a certain vintage might recall that a normal size apartment might be closer to 450 to 500 square feet, and would have regarded these 700 some square feet as palatial back in the day. So that's just my my word on that. So, Plan Commissioners, we do have a prepared motion here, Plan Commission Motion 2372, recommendation to City Council for approval of General Development Plan and Precise Implementation Plan for 265 South Main Street, Barry G. Lewis Trust and Thomas A. Boyks Trust, 265 South Main Street, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel number 246071314140002. Motion 2372 sets forth the city's zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes. It talks about the requirements contained in city code for rezoning and also for general development plan and precise implementation plan. The specific request to rezone from single-family residential R16 to multifamily residential planned development district overlay with, and also the October 2021 public hearing on the proposed zoning amendment and Plan Commission recommendation to approve the requested amendment and the general development plan and precise implementation plan that have been prepared. This motion does provide for a Plan Commission recommendation to approve the general development plan and precise implementation plan for redevelopment of 265 South Main Street, subject to recommendation terms and requirements contained in the planner's memo, which Mr. Wolf did talk about. First, to revise the landscaping plan and plan schedule to provide screening, recycling and refuse, and for evergreen trees to be size 7 feet tall or higher at the time of planting. Second, to clearly label building materials and colors on elevation plans, and that there will be a staff review of exterior improvements beyond maintenance. Third, record an access easement through the site to Veterans Lane for emergency services and for any additional recommendations deemed necessary by a city's engineering, public works, and fire department staff. Plan commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? Mr. Luce is here, and also his associate, Mr. Vins, is here. And any questions of them or of staff?
So I got a couple here, if I can remember them all now. I forgot to bring a pen to write them down, so please bear with me. Thanks. So I know this isn't considered a public building, but I do know the Wisconsin state statutes, any building over 3 foot or 3 stories, if it has 3,000 square foot, and it might be per floor, I don't know, but is there any requirement for them to put an elevator in for ADA compliance due to the fact that they're getting pretty strict with this stuff right now, and you're not allowing all types of residents to? Thanks.
Do we need a motion to suspend the rules?
Not this one.
Okay.
No.
Good evening. They are in the process of getting state-approved plans. They're actually at the very tail end of getting the approvals through the state. State takes everything into account as far as occupant load, but they will not need it there with the amount of exits that they have coming out of there. There's kind of a give and take on it, but they do not need to have an ADA elevator. They don't need to have any sort of mechanical assistance, rescue assistance on this one. They do have ADA rooms and they do have ADA access into there, but they don't need to have it for the second and third floor.
Okay.
Sprinklers are a big part of that.
Yeah, okay, I get that. And then the other thing that I had is talk about suspending the rules, because I would like the petitioners to address the issues that were brought up by their neighbors, so we don't have to ask pointing questions. Maybe they can help us understand how they plan to help alleviate some of the stresses that the neighbors are going through in this planning process. So I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules and allow the petitioners to speak, and on behalf of that question I just asked, and anything else they want to say.
Mr. Coots will second the motion to suspend.
Mr. Foster moved and Mr. Coots seconded to suspend the rules to allow petitioners to answer questions. Mr. Luce and or Mr. Vins, would you care to approach the podium and then?
Ms. Lazar, do you need a vote?
We got to vote on that.
Oh, yes, we do have to vote on it,
Yes.
excuse me. We have the motion and the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote on that.
Ms. Lazarus,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Dr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Coots.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Aye, very good. All right, gentlemen, you can approach the podium, and there may be some questions.
Okay, what would you like me to answer?
So your neighbors brought up a couple things that were of concern for them, air conditioners, setbacks,
The air
drainage.
conditioning is going to be contained inside the building, from what I understand.
So it's going to be like a HVAC system that's all
Yes.
internal?
Mm-hmm. There will
Okay,
not be window units.
awesome.
The fire escape that he mentioned has been there for 150 or 60 years. It's a steel fire escape. I didn't put it there. I'm not touching it. It's the way it's been with the building for all that time.
Yeah, and it was probably built for the specific use of the building at that time, I'm assuming,
But I mean, it's still I-beams.
right?
I can't remove that.
Okay.
What was the other one?
The retention pond?
My architect isn't here, he's on vacation.
Oh.
He's the one that, with the input of the agent at City Hall, this is where he put it.
Okay,
You know, if we can
You got
move
any-
it.
Dustin?
input on
Yeah,
that?
the petitioners, designers have been working with Strand and Associates on the design of the pond and compliance with local requirements for the pond. So obviously, with the addition of some of the hard surface, the pond is required. The release of the pond, I don't want to say pond, it's really just a depression to slow the release of any water from the site so it doesn't negatively impact the surrounding properties. I will say that that is kind of the role of Public Works and engineering to ensure the design does not result in negative impacts to surrounding property owners. Other than that, I can't say too much to it. It is why the engineers are reviewing that to determine where the outfall is and how it will potentially flow between property lines, along minimal swale, or probably likely flowing westward towards veterans in the marshland.
And unless I'm totally off base, I thought that building was either condemned or in the process of being condemned back in 2020. Did that ever go through?
Excuse me, Attorney Drescher can speak to the specifics of it, but there was at one time a raise order sought on the building. That raise order is likely old enough to be ineffective at this point, and so it's not something that the city would rely upon. The city's goal would be to seek a redevelopment to bring it up into compliance with code and to remedy the issue. But for whatever reason in the past, it was not pursued, the raise order.
I would also like to mention, it has been listed on a historical register as a contributing factor to downtown. And I do have 2 sets of tax credits coming with the property.
Yeah, got it. I remember when that was passed through, it wasn't a historical thing. Truly, there is some historical significance to that building.
Yeah.
So, oh, shoot. So, and I'm not going to question you about this. I'm assuming all your workers are going to be contracted, licensed workers.
My contractors, over the years, I've renovated numerous buildings in this town, and I resent that being questioned to me.
That's
I
why
went
I
from the
said that
Fargo
I'm not
Mansion,
going
which
to
was
question
condemned.
you.
So,
I said
as far as I know, all my contractors will be licensed.
Okay, because I know we've had some problems in the past when I was in city council with you working on your other buildings, so I just wanted to put that
I know.
out there, so the question has been asked and the question has been answered publicly.
Any other questions?
When we were here in October of 2021, it was stated, not by you, you weren't here, but it was stated by your representative that the work would be done in 6 months.
It can't be done in 6 months.
It's been, true, and it's almost been 2 years. Is the tax credit that you talked about, aren't those historical tax credits? Doesn't the work has to happen within 2 years, otherwise
No,
it has
it's
to
within
reapply?
5.
It's 5?
Mhm.
Is that because
And it's
it's,
whenever they activate. I haven't activated them.
We, prior to the council meeting, if this were to move forward, the city will be pursuing a development agreement with Mr. Luce, in which case we'll be discussing a project timeline with him.
have any improvements been made to the site since October of 2021?
I would say no. We've kept the grass cut, and I wasn't allowed inside the building, sir.
Is the inside of the building that much worse than the outside of the building then? If people aren't allowed in it? I honestly don't know. I mean, could we grant,
The
if they
building
apply
is
for a
not-
certificate of occupancy, could that be granted right now?
So, no. I want to go back to the raise order and formally what has occurred on the property. It has not been condemned at this point. A raise order and an order to vacate the property, to empty it out, was established in, I believe it was September of 2019, actually. Actually, it was August of 2019. The property at that point was vacated and a raise order was delivered. The city would have entertained the process and moved forward with the process of condemning and raising the building. However, the petitioner expressed interest in redevelopment. Since that point, it has been vacant to our understanding, and the petitioner has been taking steps in planning and processes. And frankly, it's taken too long, and it probably shouldn't have necessarily gotten to this point. But at this point, there have been appropriate plans with the mechanism of a PDD overlay that probably does accommodate the code. So that's where we're at. And I think based on this property and the discussion that the Plan Commission is having right now, either the City Council eventually does pass an ordinance that grants the zoning amendment that was previously contemplated, moves forward with a development agreement, establishes timeframe for this redevelopment to be accomplished, or it doesn't. And in that circumstance, if it doesn't, I think the only answer at this point is another raise order, that process, condemnation, and ultimately a fresh start with the site.
At this point, I don't know that, because it's taken the time it has, it's almost like it's, falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. I would love to see the plan just nailed down tight before we voted to, send it off to the city council. Specifically, the exterior of the building, that's something that many of the neighbors in October of 2021 talked about, and something that's come up again today and will be a big factor. So I would be in favor of tabling this for a month or 2 months, however long it takes to get the plan exactly so that we don't have to say, oh, we're going to improve it, but we got to work in this area, in this area, in this area. I would love to see all those areas hammered out before moving it on for approval, simply because we've been hearing for years about plans.
May I ask some questions, make some comments before you make a formal motion, Mr. Coots? Thanks. And I'm newer to the Plan Commission, so I wasn't on the commission in some of the previous discussions, but I've been reading through the material, and I appreciate the background information. I am wondering about, if we could talk a little bit more specifically about that fire escape. Do we have information about whether it does cross a property line into the neighbor's property? And are we, do we have the authority to allow that to continue, or do we have the authority to not allow that to continue? I guess I wanted to make sure that we are fully addressing that concern that the neighbor brought forward. There's no dimensions on the diagrams that I could see, but I think we were told that it's a 5-foot setback, so I'm thinking if there's 2 sets of stairs that might be more than 5 feet wide.
I do not have details on the
fire escape's
fire
been
escape.
there.
Yeah, the fire escape, whether it's encroaches on the neighboring property or not. We do allow exceptions in the code for setbacks related to ADA necessary improvements. This is not an ADA improvement. This is a life safety. It's a little different. I don't have an answer for you on whether, because it has been there for decades upon decades, whether it's, you know, a kind of entitled appurtenance to the home. I don't know structurally if it could be moved, and that's more of a building inspection question. So I don't have a distinct answer for you. I would be inclined to believe that, yes, it probably does encroach upon the neighboring property, but now we're getting into some aspects of real estate law that it's been there forever. That as long as they're typically allowed to maintain it.
Yeah, but you also have to think, if you're doing major remodels, stuff like that may have been grandfathered in is no longer grandfathered in once you start remodeling.
It is
And I don't know how that affects Wisconsin.
It is a very fair point, and Attorney Drescher should point out that certainly is within the purview of the Plan Commission, the council, to require it to be removed or just moved. So,
With regard to the approval of a planned development district overlay on this property, I would think that the city council, based on a plan commission recommendation, would have great latitude to require such facilities to be removed to an appropriate location. If there is an appropriate location, if they're necessary. I don't think that the fire escape has specifically been addressed to the point where I could say that it's legal or not personally, or necessarily that the current location is the only location for that. I don't have information there. I would say it's within the purview of the city council to require that to be addressed in consideration of a planned development district overlay.
Just a follow-up on that, is the fire escape a necessary safety feature of this redevelopment? Is it something that the city code would be requiring some fire escape?
yes.
Yeah, it may be. We would have to,
It's from somewhere, yes.
we would likely defer to the fire department on what needs to be, what requirements and whether that feature is essential to the health and safety of the residents. And
Okay, thank you. The other area I wanted to, I guess, ask about is I'm looking at the procedures in our city code for the planned development district. And I know we've had this type of situation at city council a couple times since I've been on the council where, and the concept is that we make exceptions in exchange. You know, there's some flexibility offered to the developer in exchange for some higher expectations in another area. And I'm looking at 660-206A1, and that talks about the purpose of the planned development district. I don't know if there's anywhere else that there are some specific standards that are applied, but this just talks about that the development shall provide a much higher level of site design, architectural control, and other aspects of aesthetic and functional excellence. And I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is I think it kind of goes to Mr. Kutz's point about, you know, if we, there's a list of exceptions to the code that are being proposed. And so what are we looking at that's in exchange for that? And I think the building exterior would be a pretty important aspect. Certainly the preservation of and reuse of a historic structure has value in and of itself, but if we don't know what the outside is going to look like, it's a little hard to evaluate the aesthetics.
Yeah, it is a challenge when talking about planned development districts, because they are typically applied in a larger context, right? Usually a larger property setting where flexibility of bulk regulations, setbacks, heights, et cetera, is necessary to get a better and more cohesive design of a site. It is pretty rare to utilize it on a site of this size. That being said, the city codes and ordinances, which is common for many, don't apply real well to legacy structures within a community. The only other avenue here would be strict adherence to an R312 district, and they would need to go to Board of Appeals for all of these issues that have arisen, and then they would have to meet the threshold for hardship, which is a very different threshold. That doesn't mean that it can't meet that, but on each one of those exceptions, you'd have to meet hardship or practical difficulty in complying with the code. Some are very obvious, setbacks, et cetera. Others, unit size, well, now you're talking moving walls, right? So the planned development district is intended to say, for latitude on some of the bulk regulations, the community will get more, something better. Whether it's public spaces, it is, in this case, it was determined last time, the preservation of a locally significant building. To my knowledge, it's not on the National Register. I've not seen any nomination papers to put it on the National Register, but it does have, say, local historic significance. That was important. And then, again, having this type of housing product, smaller kind of single bedroom units proximate to downtown was viewed as a plus to the community. So there isn't really a specific threshold that has to be met. It's somewhat subjective, but if you don't feel that the litmus has been met in your eyes based upon what we've put in the code, what has been adopted in the code, then you would obviously not be supportive of it. So it is a bit of a challenge, but it really goes back to, it is a tight site that was developed long before the codes and contemporary codes and ordinances were put in place. Even the one we replaced, when we rewrote it from the early 1970s, it didn't really comply with that. So I'll say this is kind of the best regulatory framework we have to try to address a legacy structure and renovating it. So I wish I had something better to tell you.
Well, and thank you for that. And obviously, you're not supposed to tell us how we should vote or how, how we should evaluate this. We all have to do that and think about what we feel are the pros and cons. And I think we have a longtime city resident who has invested a lot in historic preservation and, given a lot to our community in doing that. This is a tricky property, and the city has taken steps, at least based on the memos that we received, to allow PDD for a smaller site. It used to be limited, right, to more than 5 acres, so now we can even go through this process. Mr. Luce can go through this process, and there are certainly some positives, if for no other reason than to, have this be redeveloped and be able to have people living there that can be close to downtown and to maintain the historic nature of the building. So yeah, I'm not sure what the right answer is right now, but I'm really trying to think about what we have before us now, and do we have enough information to indicate that the flexibility, that the exceptions that we would be granted are offset, by the benefits. And to me, I agree with you, Mr. Coots. I feel like more information on the exterior and how that's going to be improved would go a long way to help understand that aesthetics.
Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify an issue. The zoning code was not changed in relation to size of lots for this property. It was done for others. Drumlin Crossing, which is just south of the new Topos, right adjacent to the trail, also took advantage of this. That's a property that's some, I don't know, 70 or 80 feet wide and 1,000 or 1,200 feet deep. Again, a very challenging property to enable a housing product that was sorely needed in the community, which was single-family attached housing. So I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't the conception that codes were changed specifically for the applicant's proposal.
And I apologize, that wasn't what I meant to imply either, but obviously that, this is one of, obviously, other properties that now can take advantage of that process.
But I would like to give a little history of this building. I bought this building back in 1988, and it was a 32-room hotel, the boarding house at the time. I renovated and I used it as a bed and breakfast for a number of years until a hotel came to town, and then it took away my business. And I put it back to a boarding house. There's been talk about changing it to an apartment building for years, but the amount of money it's going to take is astronomical. And I'm willing to do that to save this building. I think that's the best use of this. It doesn't function as a boarding house. So that's why I decided and I put it with the apartments the way they were, so that there's two on one side and one on the other. It will be done with like everything else I do, with the period in mind of what it's done. And I think my past record should speak for itself. I want you to know that's why I'm doing this.
Thank you.
I think it's a great use of it, so. Sorry.
I just have concerns about parking, and I understand reasoning and all that. Is there parking? I can't read that.
Put your,
Mike's not on.
It's not. Well,
there.
okay, I got concerns about the parking, and I understand your reasoning and so on. I can't read that sign, but is there parking allowed on the street?
Other side of the
Not
street.
on
Not on
On the
that
other
side,
side.
on the other side,
Across the street.
On the other side?
yeah.
So if there's visitors or whatever for these people, they can park across the street. Can they park overnight over there,
Generally, yes.
generally?
Generally, yes, outside of the snow season, when we have,
Yeah.
when we have no parking.
Yeah. Because the concern is a lot of cars parking on the street, and I would think that would be a concern of the neighbors and so on. That said, there seems to be two issues. And one is the fire escape that we should get some answers on. And number two is a timeline. That there's a timeline set, that this will be finished, completed, started, whatever. And we need to nail that down.
I've asked for a year and a half.
Yeah, we would need to put a timeline into the development agreement. So that is on city staff's mind, which would be approved by the city council in a development agreement for this, and would have the responsibilities and obligations of the developer, which would include the timeline. So that's not something that won't occur. It's not in the documents you have before you right now, but it will be a part of the final approval of this if it moves forward.
As is required in the code.
Right, which is required by, the development agreement is required under our ordinances.
That agreement doesn't come before the plan commission though, right?
Not typically, no.
So we
I've never
wouldn't
run
be
one through
basing
plan
our decision on seeing that first or
Right.
anything then, okay.
And I guess one other thing to note, because this is a PDD, these exceptions only affect that PDD and has nothing to
Right.
do with any other R3, 12.
That's correct. It's not a precedential situation.
Yeah.
Their case-by-case basis is based on the unique features of the lot in which it's being applied to.
Yeah.
And the negotiation between the city and the developer on exceptions and standards that the city expects.
Got it.
I'd like to make one comment, and that is, to the point of tabling. I think we've tabled too much, and I think the neighbors deserve, Barry deserves, the community deserves to get moving on this. He's been there before, and then all of a sudden something else happens, and we're back here. So I think it's important to take some action, and I think you'll start to see something happen, and that's what's needed by everybody.
Why has no action been taken so far?
Because
Why are there windows still boarded up?
Because I wasn't supposed to be in the building. Every time I went to the building, the inspector came by and said, "You're not supposed to be in here."
Mr. Coots, one of the requirements is to comply with local codes and ordinances. So, and I'm sure the building inspector can talk about why someone wasn't allowed in the building, but it's not a legal and conforming building or site at this time. There are specific requirements that needed to be made. These exceptions we've talked about, the extension of the water specifically for sprinkling, all those things were required. So, and again, the current condition of the building wouldn't allow someone in there to make any improvements while they were navigating this process. I think Attorney Drescher talked about, it probably took a little longer than it should have. But we're kind of back to where we were. We have plans for the utility requirements and such. As Mr. Daly said, because of all of the improvements, there will be an agreement that gets structured and executed, that would get structured and executed between the city and the applicant. And if certain measures aren't met, then there would be kind of the next steps could include raising, but.
My understanding, the holdup wasn't Mr. Luce at all, because he was not taken action on by the council, which
I think
held
there
it
was
up.
inadequate information for the city to make a final determination on and to grant final approvals. And since the building was not conforming, the building inspector could not issue a build permit for renovations to it because they would have not been allowable under the code. Over time, there were some minor allowances to begin demolition and removal of things out of the building, which have occurred. But based on my reading of the past conversations on this item, the plans that were available at the time were not adequate for the city to move forward with the final approval of it, which it did not. Which resulted in improvements not being made over the past 2 years on it.
But that's not to say that I haven't spent money on the project. I've, spent $20,000 or $50,000 for the fire hydrant to be put in place with Quam Engineering. I've spent multiple thousands of dollars to get to this point today. So it's not like I haven't done anything, because that's not the way it was.
So basically, this process needs to happen before anything else can truly move forward.
Yes.
This is the point we're at. This has to happen, otherwise nothing else can move forward. So if we table it.
In order for the use that it
Right.
is contemplated, yes.
So then, okay.
So I guess my recommendation to the Plan Commission, I know there has been a history on this property and that there have been conversations and other things that have occurred or not occurred on this, but I would encourage the Plan Commission to consider the plan set that is before you tonight and what that looks like moving forward. So we do have an application in front of us. If there's additional information that the Plan Commission believes it needs before issuing a recommendation to the city council, then I would make those clear to the applicant with an expectation of the time in which to return for that. If the Plan Commission is comfortable with the plan before it and moving forward with the approval with the conditions as laid out in the planner's memo, then that is also available to you to move it on to the city council. But I would focus on the submitted application before you tonight with the knowledge that a developer's agreement needs to and will be executed and negotiated and executed between the applicant and the city. And that developer's agreement will include a timeline in which the applicant will need to adhere to under the obligations in that agreement.
Yeah, and there'll be people looking at it with a lot more brain power concerning rules, regulations, and laws than us, so.
So with that being said, I think the concerns that we're raising, which I really appreciate the discussion and the information that we have from Mr. Luce. The planner's memo talks about the exterior building materials and colors, that does need to be submitted and reviewed by staff. It talks about additional recommendations deemed necessary by Engineering, Public Works, and Fire Department. So I guess if Mr. Daly, if you could convey back to the fire department that we had some questions about that fire escape, that I would think the council would as well. And so hopefully they can, take a look at that and make sure that they weigh in on that. And the timeline, it sounds like, would be addressed by the council in a developer's agreement. So given all that, I'm okay with moving forward so that the project can keep going, and I would make a motion that we approve Plan Commission motion 23-7-2, which is a recommendation to City Council for approval of the General Development Plan and Precise Implementation Plan for 265 South Main Street.
And Mr. Foster will second it.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Curler and seconded by Mr. Foster to pass motion 23-7-2. Is there any further discussion?
That includes the conditions also?
Yes.
It does include the conditions, which speaks to the concerns that were raised.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's down.
Requirements in the planner's memo.
Yep.
Mhm. Yes. All right, any further discussion? All right, in that case, we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Dr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Coots,
Nay.
Ms. Lazaris.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
All right, thank you. The next item number 8, recommendations for future agendas. I have plan commissioners, if you have been following the path that the comprehensive plan took once we released it, the council has carefully studied it, and in fact, they met last night. The comprehensive plan is going to be coming back to the Plan Commission for some further work. They have a certain list of things they would like the Plan Commission to address, and I listened to the discussion that was held yesterday evening by the City Council, and I have to commend the council members for taking the time they did to go over the comprehensive plan and to look at things that perhaps deserve more attention. So I look forward to, we're going to receive their comments and the list of things to look at. And would we be able to start at the meeting in August?
Great.
That's the plan right now.
Well, that would be fine.
Does that mean we'll be back to a 6 o'clock meeting in August? Is it going to be that long, or?
That's your discretion. There's a list of things that we'll be providing to you that the city council would like the plan commission to focus on. The plan commission is entitled to look at any, now that it's back to the plan commission, you may look at and revise any piece of that plan. So it depends how broadly the plan commission would like to review that plan again, or how narrowly you may limit the scope of your review. But we can accommodate any time that the plan commission would like.
All right.
Yeah, if I can remind you, the reason we went to 6 o'clock was in the event that there was other regular business.
Yeah.
And that we weren't, if we had to,
Right,
regular
right.
business, you weren't getting done at 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Are there other items that are anticipated for the August meeting that we know about now?
Possibly.
Right?
Is that as non-committal as I could be?
That's why.
Again, just for freshness, I think the 6 o'clock start worked really well in the event that there was a 2-hour discussion on items. But I defer to you.
Plan commissioners, would you like to have the next one at 6 o'clock so we can review and discuss the material that is going to be in front of us? Would you like that? We can if you like.
I don't know, but I know at least 2 other people here do. How long is the list?
About a dozen items?
A
maybe?
dozen items?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are very specific, and they'll be a part of the council minutes from last night.
Okay.
So some are some minor housekeeping things, and then others are, please evaluate or consider some things. So they will have a little bit of discussion, but I will say that the direction was very specific from the council.
I like the idea of narrowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
That sounds like we would be safe meeting at 7.
Yeah.
Be okay. Okay. Well, let's just meet at 7 for the August meeting, and we'll take that up and the other items that may come forward. All right. And we go on to item number 9 for adjournment.
Move adjournment.
Mr. Coots will
Mason.
second.
Moved by Dr. Mason and seconded by Mr. Coos to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're adjourned.